Our second panel session is in regard to educating stakeholders and educating people in the green building environment. And I think this is key, especially just with what Matt has asked me. How do we educate the entire value chain of green building stakeholders? And how do we ensure that this now results in developing efficient, sustainable buildings? So I think it's great to have both of you here from very different backgrounds. I'd ask you guys to both introduce yourself separately first, and then we can go into the question.
My name is Myles Kritzinger. I work for a private equity fund called International Housing Solutions, or IHS, and we play in the affordable housing space, so purely residential. And predominantly in South Africa, also moving into the sub-Saharan African markets. In terms of what we've done to date as a business, and without harping on too long about it, is we've delivered about 40,000 homes to the affordable market over the last 10 or so years. So we were established back in about 2007-8. We went through the global financial crisis and the hard times. And during that time, we've obviously had the success story of being able to implement and execute and deliver homes to the affordable housing market. In terms of equity and capital that we've raised in excess of 500 million USD across 3 funds, and we've probably got about 380 to 400 million USD of funds under management in terms of capital value. So one of the big success stories for us as a business has been the implementation of green housing in the residential space in South Africa, and also moving into sub-Saharan Africa. So been very much involved in the initiation and the kickstarting of Edge and green homes in the resi space. And I suppose it's maybe an interesting fact, but without blowing our horn too much, is that we were involved in terms of the certification of the first resi project in the African continent. So that was about 3 years ago where we got certification for that. So yeah, a very, very good success story from our side.
Was that Edge or Green Star?
We've been mandated to roll out EDGE certified homes. So Green Star obviously attaches itself a bit more to commercial builds and retail builds. And I suppose in terms of EDGE, one of the beauties of it is that it's a simplistic, easy to use model and relatively cost effective. So when looking at the affordable housing space, it makes sense.
My name is Hasnain Noorani. I am the owner and the managing director of a chain of hotels by the name of the PrideInn Hotels and Conferencing. PrideInn Hotels and Conferencing was actually established in 2011, and over a 7-year period, we have seen good exponential growth with 8 hotels. We started off with our first hotel with a 28-room hotel that was in 2011, and coming down to 2018, we have 8 hotels with over 600 room nights within Nairobi and Mombasa. From the initial stages itself, when we established PrideInn, one of the key factors that we have always put into consideration is how to make our hotels as efficient as possible. So we have always focused on green, because we actually came into the market targeting the mid-tier brand. Back in 2011, there wasn't much of the mid-tier brand available within Nairobi, and that is exactly how we came into the market, because we wanted to offer a $100 hotel. When we did our research and analysis, what we realized is to be able to offer a $100 hotel, we had to make sure that the cost of running our hotels was as low as possible. So we were allowed to have a slightly higher capital expenditure, but then the cost of running the hotels was meant to be as low as possible, and that is how we started researching more into building green. Our recent project was in Mombasa, which is the PrideInn Paradise Beach Resort and Convention Center. That's a 300-room beach resort with a convention center of 2,500 people, all over 16 acres. As much as we would have loved it to be a full brand new project, like a greenfield project, but then we had to do some, it was more of a renovation, a whole renovation project, and so we had the outer shell, and what we could work with is the inner shell. So we didn't have much of flexibility of trying to shape the buildings the way we wanted to, but what we really looked at is how do we ensure that, and especially for beach resorts, I'm sure you're all aware that the cost of running a beach resort can be huge, and if you're not careful about making sure they're affordable to run, the costs, you could actually run into negative gross profits. And under PrideInn, we have 4 different brands. There is the PrideInn Express brand. There is the PrideInn Business. Our PrideInn Express is our budget brand. We have the PrideInn Business, which is our mid-tier brand, like a 3-star. We have the PrideInn Plus, which is our luxury brand, and we have then we have the PrideInn Suites, which is our long stay and extended stay brand. So that is how the PrideInn is divided, and with all our hotels, that's exactly what we focus. Going forward, we have a huge vision going forward in terms of expanding into every major county within Kenya, and in terms of the long-term vision, to be one of the best local branded chains within East and Central Africa. We have now developed more keen interest into green buildings. We have seen the huge benefits that our recent beach resort has offered us because of trying to focus towards green buildings.
Thank you, Hasnain. And anything interesting about you that we should know?
Yes, parachute jumping, skydiving. That's how we launched our last hotel. But yes, we made sure that that was as green as possible.
Excellent. Thank you. Who do you think the most important stakeholder to educate is?
I think from our perspective, and it comes down to the sustainability of the initiative at the end of the day, is that the benefit implied and obviously built into the home is only as good as its user. So for us as a business, and I suppose one of the big pros is that we do hold on to rental stock. We do have a portfolio of about 8,000 units, and currently about 800 of those are green homes. But getting users and getting tenants to use the unit in the right way is obviously critically important when coming to unlocking that benefit. You look at what the benefits are. Yes, there's the equity in the home and the value that the home will attract at the end of the day in terms of its resale. And again, that comes down to market demand. And again, how the market receives green homes and whether they're willing to obviously recognize a benefit in terms of resale, so looking at the secondary market. But the definite and the obvious benefit that you get is the saving on utilities, especially in an edge context as well. And that's an immediate benefit that our tenants and our users get and obviously receive on a month to month. So we're going through a process at the moment of quantifying data, putting it together, trying to make sense of it, obviously identifying what the true benefit is in terms of savings on utilities, giving that back to the tenants and to the people that stay in our homes, but also during that process, educating them on how to use the home in the right way. Over and above that, and maybe it talks to the government side of it, but definitely financiers are also important. I think to kickstart any development, your ability to raise capital and to go and gain funding in the market is of critical importance. So the sooner that we can get financiers to buy into the concept and to put money behind green initiatives, obviously that's going to benefit the whole setup as well.
I think if I would look at it in a very practical example, being as parents, you set an example for your children. I believe the government is the first body that really needs to be educated. Why? I was just looking at one of these examples that where in Kenya we have the solar paneling, the hot water installation using through the solar panels. Actually been forced by the government that every building now needs to have solar panels for the hot water heating. But I sometimes wonder, do those government buildings themselves have the solar hot water heating? What about the government housing? Do those have the solar hot water heating already? We all know that the government is a caretaker. They're the ones who do the approvals for the building plans. If today the government hasn't been trained or if the government hasn't been educated on the benefits that it offers to the country as a whole, I don't think it will really pass out onto, because you could educate the end users, you could educate the architects and the engineers. At the end of the day, what happens is today as the end user, I might decide that, okay, let's look at my hotel in the first place. If I look at my energy costs in running a hotel, they are large, but they're not the biggest percentage of all my costs. So sometimes my question is, do I need to do all that sort of capital expenditure for making it as an energy efficient building? Yes, no, is a question that is debatable. And a lot of those investors would think on a similar manner. You look at you look at someone who does housing. Today, if I'm going to build a real estate and I want to let it out as for like to the individual house owners, to let it out on rent. By me making it as an energy efficient building, what advantage or what benefits am I having? Because at the end of the day, it's the people who are renting those houses are the ones who are paying for the bills and for the energy costs. So those are factors that are not looked into. However, if today the government is fully educated on the benefits that it offers in terms of the environment, in terms of the country, and in terms of the whole efficiency, they are the caretakers of the whole planning and the building systems. So I guess if they have been educated and they believe in the idea, they would eventually push it to make sure that at the approval stage, those are the questions they will be asking the architects as to how exactly are you building this to make it energy efficient, or how is it coming into green. And today, if those building plans are not approved, if they don't have the element of green, ordinarily, then it will be the architects who now go ahead and educate their end users. to make sure that, look, if you want us to get to this building approval stages, this is what we need to do. The reason you are spending more money on in such capital expenditures is because these are the advantages that is going to offer you in the future. And automatically, everyone starts educating each other. That's exactly what I believe.
So we see that our private sector will come in with very innovative ideas. The uptake will be quite high, and then government will come in slowly after that. Don't you think that it will slow down the progression of sustainable and green building if we wait for government to be educated first and to implement those factors?
Yes and no also. You see, they could be the education could be done to multiple sources at the same time. Whilst you're trying to push with the individual end users and maybe the architects and the consultants, you could have a team that could at the same time be educating the government at the same time. But even with the government, it's as much as sometimes it does become slow educating them and making them understand and for them to accepting it. However, it has to be started, and eventually it has to be pushed through with the government. So whilst you are trying to get the little benefits from that side, okay, the bigger benefits would come in if the government actually buys it out.
You are seeing the private sector leading and the government obviously tagging along as well. In terms of policy rollout, in terms of tender process as well, and what they're prescribing in terms of housing specifically, is that we do see sustainability coming into the housing requirements as well. It might just be the prescriptive planning of it for now, and I think the incentives will follow as well, as we start to get a handle on exactly what that means. But there is definitely a follow from government, and these things pick up momentum quickly. You look at it again when we started 4 years ago, and it was effectively off a zero base in terms of residential. 4 years later, we're seeing all of our tender documents in terms of affordable housing, incorporating some element of sustainability into them, some kind of certification as well. So for government to cotton on and to obviously tag along with the private sector, it does move quicker than you think. But agreed, I do think that the private sector probably has to lead there and actually demonstrate what it is that they're getting in terms of the whole initiative.
If you have the right policy in place, and you have the right professionals in place to build a green building, and technically the green building is fully efficient, it works, it has all the bells and whistles, but the end user is not educated on how to operate the green building. So let's say it has louvers, and the louvers need to be switched to where the sun is or isn't to shade the building. What impact does that have? So if you completely remove any other external factors apart from just the end user use of a building, what's the impact of a green building? How efficient is it, or how possible is it to use a building efficiently if you just take in consideration the end user?
Even for us as a fund and for us as a business, it's been a long education process as the developer or as the funder and the investor. In terms of the end user and in terms of the tenant or the home occupier, that's also going to be an extremely long process. I think that's not an overnight exercise, and it's not something that's going to happen within the next few years. It's going to be constant, and it's going to have to be something where we put them in a position, empower them to obviously use the units correctly. Maybe back to your question, though, is how efficient can the unit be? Effectively, we work is that it's measured across 3 different components or categories. So energy, water consumption, and then embodied energy and materials as well. Obviously, we need to tick the 20% box efficiency on all 3 of those. So what, again, is implied in the unit on completion of build is that on a materials level, it is at least 20% more efficient than your base case or your general building principles and best practice. Then it does come down to the consumption and the utility of the tenant or of the homeowner at the end of the day. Again, I think we've had the benefit of looking after rental stock. One of the things that we do is that we monitor and measure the performance of our properties in terms of the green interventions. So in terms of quantifying data, quantifying that benefit and that saving, passing it on to the tenant, but not necessarily in terms of a kilowatt hours or in terms of kiloliters used or consumed. What we've actually done is we've brought it back to a rand value, so to currency value, because we believe that people better understand what the impact is on their pockets as opposed to what is my energy saving or what is my kiloliter water saving. And when people start to understand and see that benefit in terms of their monthly cost and expenditure, and I touched on it yesterday in one of our workshops, is that what we've done over the past 12 months in terms of actual records is we've seen that we've saved tenants the equivalent of 1 month's worth of rentals just in terms of utilities. You put that in an affordable market context, and that's significant. So again, yes, it might only be 500 Rand, so $40 odd per month in terms of saving. But again, in an affordable market, that's a lot of money for people who are only earning, you know, a few $100s a month. So efficiency, it's there, it's built into the unit, but it's going to be a constant exercise of keeping the market up to speed, how to use it properly, and making sure that the users are empowered in the right way.
How have you taught, or how have you made sure that your people are educated?
Let's say even in terms of my own staff and my own team at PrideInn, generally we generally have those monthly training sessions where we actually train our staffs in terms of their understanding the whole principle. Because remember, investing into green building is one part of it. Sustaining the green building is the second part of it. You could invest, but then if you're not able to sustain it, there is practically, it's of practically no use. So sustaining and making sure that the applications that you've actually installed are actually working and they're being sustained and people know exactly how to take care of them. The actual education and training. But apart from that, in terms of the stakeholders, like he said, it's about the change, or it's about the balance that is left in the pocket after having invested. Although one of the biggest challenges that I feel that we face today, even if we were to come in with maybe like with the if you were to come in with a grid system for using the solar, it's a huge investment. Like recently, we were looking at having a grid system for the PrideInn Paradise Beach Resort, because to try and see how we can use less of the electricity itself. So the grid system, it's a huge investment. It would nearly cost like what? Nearly $1 million to come in with a grid system, a huge solar system. But again, the question is, how do you know which are the reliable and trustworthy companies? There's too many things happening these days around the world. There are very many companies that open day one, they say they can do for you a job, you check on all the credentials, you check on things, everything looks good, everything looks rosy. You know, they have come, they've put the system for you, 6 months, 8 months down the line, things have started developing, an issue, start calling them, and they say that this is happening, that is happening. The education is one part of it, but even being assured that the companies you're working with, you know, who are they certified by, how are they being certified? Is it just that there's some certification body? The certification body would say, yes, they know exactly what they're doing. But what sort of strength do they have in terms of the company to be able to sustain themselves over the next 10 years? Because it's more like a partnership. It's not just that I buy it from, I buy it once, I buy it and that's it. You know, it's buying it, implementing it, educating it, and sustaining it over the period of years for the investor to receive the real benefit. Because the real benefit really does not come in a span of 1-2 years. It's more like a payback of over maybe 4 or 5 years, depending on the sort of investment, depending on the sort of things that you're doing. The capital expenditure is high. So that's exactly what, so yes, education, but trying to understand how to work, how to and who to work with.
I wanted to ask the audience, how many of you have gone into a hotel or into a service department and looked for the sustainability, you know, elements, whether it's from the towels and laundry to anything to do with sustainability, and noted it? So is that something that you see, and I'll ask from both to both of you, is this something that people are asking for consciously?
I think the market is starting to ask the question just, you know, based on the relevance of it at the moment, and especially, again, water, electricity, scarce resource, saving and obviously cost of those utilities as well. So the market is starting to say, well, what have you incorporated into the home? What is there that's obviously going to benefit me at the end of the day as a user or homeowner? I suppose from our perspective is that we've always relied on the simplicity of edge. And again, looking at the investment cost, the relatively low capital cost that it would obviously take to incorporate the interventions into a project. What we've done as a business is we've effectively standardized the type of interventions and the spec that we incorporate into our project. And it is as easy as just a notch up from the existing principles or design specification that you would normally see in a home. So funny things like aluminium windows, LED lights, dual flush toilets, low flow shower and taps. You know, things that aren't hugely complicated that you would naturally see in a unit or in a home anyway. So yes, the market is asking the question again, but I don't think it's of the complexity that they can't understand it or that they can't use it. So definitely been an easier rollout for us though.
I've actually seen the trend over a couple, because as PrideInn Hotels, we are very focused on the actual business market. So we do quite a bit of conferencing and work a lot with the corporates. So recently I have seen that a lot of these corporates, a lot of our corporate clients, when you start filling out the tenders, that's one of the questions they ask also, is that that's one of the questions that actually qualifies you to become one of their suppliers, or so that they're actually able to use your facilities. And you see that even when they come in for the ground inspection, those are the questions they also ask in terms of, so how are you working with them and towards the environment, and making sure that your operations are efficient in terms of, the aim towards making sure that they're saving of environment. So yes, like you would normally look at those towel cards that say that, please spare your towels and all those sort of things. But apart from that, they're also looking at what sort of, they also look at our lamps, our LED lights, what sort of LED, do we have the LED lamps or not? They look at our heating system. So we actually have to now clarify and specify all those things that we have done towards making our buildings as green, and that's when you qualify to become one of their suppliers. So yes, we have seen that over the past 1 year, that we have some few large corporates who have now gone towards making sure that you only get the business if you're aimed towards making your hotels green. We've also had clients who are also consistently, when you actually use those towel cards, and you see the clients actually do listen to that, and the fact that they do understand. And at the point of check-in, we try and educate our clients also, saying that, we want to make sure that we are saving our environment. We want to make sure that we are working towards becoming as green as possible. All right. So whilst you're in your room, if you feel that we do not need to replace your linen or your towels, please just hang them, or we have a particular towel card that can be placed on the bed. So it is those small educative directions that we give, but the changes are now being seen coming in.
What are some of the common challenges that can be solved, and how can we solve them?
South African developers definitely have that mindset of, well, we've done it this way, we've done it like that always, so why should we do it any differently? And we spoke earlier about, well, what it is in terms of that education process. Yes, there's the initial investment. Yes, there's the operational side of it, and then it's all about the sustainability afterwards. And for us, it's been a work in progress over the last 4 years. It's resulted in internal workshops, technical workshops, sit-downs with banks, sit-downs with developers, taking them through the model, practical examples, and then just also doing it. And getting it out into the market and onto the ground. Once people actually saw how easy it was to do and went through the process themselves from a practical standpoint, then I think those barriers started to break down slowly. And what we've actually seen is that because it's become such good practice, and because it's become business as usual, and people can take pride in terms of what they're doing in terms of delivery of project, is they're starting to now spill over into other developments that they're doing. So initially, definitely, there was a resistance. I think it was in terms of it's complicated, it's difficult, it's expensive. But I think what we've done over the last while is we've effectively dispelled those facts. I'd say the other big challenge that we've got at the moment is data that's available in the market to obviously support the investment case and the business case. But we're very, very quickly starting to build that data. You mentioned return on investment. How do you quantify that? How do you look at your payback period? What information is available in terms of that payback and that cost of ownership and that benefit that you derive? But that's starting to obviously build traction, and we're starting to compile that information quite rapidly.
One, if example, the consultants who are actually working on the project, and especially to do with mechanical engineers or the architects, they all get driven by the fact that we want to now make sure that our projects are directed towards sustainable building. The end user might not have the adequate knowledge, but I believe that's the reason why an end user brings in board a consultant so that they could advise him the right way forward. The end user might insist on things, but this is where the consultants do come in, and they're able to bring in the expertise who are actually going to come and show the payback period. A lot of times it's just about, why don't you do this, but the cost is going to increase this much, and people are very tight on pockets. Now, and like you said, unless and until you actually don't show them the benefits, So if today the consultants and those expertise companies who are the actual implementers are able to come together, and it's not about trying to argue with your client, but it's about actually proving him the point that today if you're going on with the normal building procedure, this is the sort of spending you're having, but your running costs are going to be this much. If you're going with this, one, the cost of financing might become cheaper because there are particular banks that would actually finance this particular project. So, and you're actually paying this over a 5-year period, for instance, for this particular one, all right? And therefore, this is the sort of saving you're going to have. And that's exactly how the end user is going to believe. So once the end user has been taught automatically, so I believe once I think the immediate actions that need to be taken are by the consultants who need to not just be a yes man, sir, or like those yes men people, more about trying to make their client understand why sustainable building is actually going to give them the huge benefits going forward.
Is there any questions in the audience?
Morning, my name is John Kabuye. I have a question, and it has to do with, of course, governance and engagement of tenants or other people who work in the hotel, for example, if you're using a hotel. So what kind of governance structures or engagement structures do you have in place so that you can engage the people and you can get some feedback from them, especially in terms of ideas on how or what they can actually do to be more sustainable, especially if you've decided to be a sustainable hotel or a sustainable facility? Thank you.
We're always trying to educate everyone within the hotel, not just the staffs, but also in terms of our clients who come into the hotel on a day-to-day basis. So in terms of how these things are actually being followed, obviously we have our checklists that are into place, making sure that at the beginning of the conference, at the point of check-in, particular steps are happening. And in terms of, like we said, sustainability, making sure that the actual service maintenances and things are also happening on a monthly basis. So there are those SOPs that are being followed, whether in terms of service, the standard operating procedures in terms of service, or whether in terms of our maintenance checklists. And that's how we generally follow through.
I'll ask for just a one-sentence parting shot.
So we always follow the kind of catchphrase, just do it, and that's where we started 4 years ago. And you fast forward very quickly, we've approved 6,500 odd units for green certification, for EDGE certification. We've certified close on 3,000. We've delivered nearly 1,000 to the market. So it is a very real solution. It is something that the market does pick up quite quickly. And if you just get out there and you just start, it's definitely something that will benefit people.
We have seen immense benefits in terms of making sure that our buildings are as green as possible. Going forward with the kind of partnerships that we are going to have, we are going to even focus more in terms of ensuring that we are building energy efficient buildings. It's not going to only just about the water harvest station and not only just about the heating, but it's just the way the whole building is designed, how the natural light flows in, the flow of air, the kind of materials that are being used. So the statement would be, all right, it's now or never. All right, if you do it now, the savings are huge. If you do it later, you're going to spend more money, but nevertheless, better late than never.
Thank you, guys, and thank you so much for the time.